bits and bones, my name is Lady V, and welcome to my channel. While on my quest of speedrun September, I've been doing, well, quite frankly, a lot of things. But one that came hand in hand with my new V2 persona was a new setup where I can present myself that way. So here, I'm going to show my process of trial and error as I came to the end product, that is, my new YouTube template. I went through a lot of different versions, so hopefully, if you're looking to make something like these for yourself, this could be a bit of a help deciding what you want, especially since I'll be reasoning through why some of the versions I made wouldn't work in the end, and save you a lot of trouble which I ended up wasting. So, in a section of my video discussing why I chose to become a VTuber, I brought up two channels on YouTube that were major inspirations for me: Overly Sarcastic Productions and Duchess Celestia. And as much as I knew I wanted a 3D persona, whereas theirs were both 2D, in terms of backgrounds, I thought what they do would suit me just fine. I liked the idea of OSP's simple but cozy library vibe, where in my own I would just spook it up a bit and have my avatar sit and talk in the corner while I discuss things on a screen. Conceptually, I came up with this: bricks, big cozy chair like I used to have in my videos where I actually vlogged, a skull, of course, and a plant because green is always good vibes, and a desk or pedestal that I could swap out each video depending on what I'm talking about. So it would be between a monitor to show movie clips or a book that I'm reviewing. But as you can see, my Photoshop prowess was not up to snuff in making all of these things look good in relation to one another. They all felt like disconnected pictures of things. I couldn't find a good-sized monitor to fill the space either. Sometimes lighting doesn't matter, but other times it really does. Everything in this image had a light focal point in a different spot, making them feel like they don't belong in the same space. On top of that, you'll notice the color palette. Whereas the comfy chair is really warm, the skull is not. And if they were in a space together, not only would the light be coming from the same direction, it would be casting the same warm hue. Because I'd been planning to have a full color set, this became a major problem. In Photoshop, to make the objects themselves come together, I was going to hand brush on top of each of the items to give them a cohesive texture, and feel more like they're from the same space. But that technique doesn't work if the lighting of all the objects are entirely different. I wasn't fully repainting them, so the fact that half of the objects were cool and half of the objects were warm was still going to be an issue. The reason I wanted to brush over the objects was twofold. I think brushstroke texture is really lovely, and two, I don't have the capacity to fully make something on my own with so much detail, like plaid, or bricks, or wood grain. In the end, I realized the reference images that I had were just a very bad fit together. That was lesson number one. If you're compiling a background scene, make sure that your objects don't look alien from one another in terms of lighting and hue. Yes, you can alter and manufacture lighting effects in Photoshop, but to an amateur, that's a whole lot of struggling when you could have just not put yourself in that position in the first place. So after discarding that whole mess, I had the brilliant idea to create something in a 3D design app. My avatar was going to be 3D after all. It made sense that she would fit in best in a scene that was 3D sculpted too. And let me just put it out there right now that all of the design apps out there that I tried were tedious and they fucking sucked. I looked up video after video on YouTube on the best free design apps out there, and as great as some of them seemed, there was always a catch. Or it just wasn't very user-friendly, or, inevitably, a lot of them took a lot more skill required to operate than just plopping furniture in and moving it around. I don't know. Maybe it was just me, but they were laggy, organized strangely, and had severely limited customizable options. They usually wanted you to upgrade and pay an unreasonable amount for the app, or actually, invest time and play it like a real game, like this phone one. I grew up addicted to Sims, but this whole mobile app that you play for fun, voting on other people's designs, where you're both just creating the best vibe that you can in the same space with the same limited item options, just doesn't make sense to me. So you know what I did? I defaulted to Sims. So here's a speed run of me designing my room setup in Sims 4, so it'd be 3D and actually look remotely like what I wanted. I did get a little sidetracked playing The Sims, as you can see. I built the rest of the house first, but I got to it eventually. Since I was going through the trouble, I figured I might as well have a setup for my second channel too. So I split the room, and I hope you appreciate the sharp contrast between my two personalities' aesthetics. So voila, I had a room and two perspectives I was going to use, one with the TV and another with the pedestal for books. I edited those a bit with perspective and went to brushing over everything for a nicer aesthetic than the sharp 3D objects and their pixelated edges. If you want a quick, easy guide on how to make your backgrounds, or just pictures in general, a bit more painterly, I found this video tutorial really helpful. The first one is more labor intensive, as you can actually add brushstrokes yourself, and the second requires a lot more navigating through Photoshop. And I ended up with these images, which I'm fairly proud of, but something was still not quite right. It was too warm and too static. There was a lot of negative space that I wouldn't be able to do anything with. Not to mention, I realized my avatar would have a hard time actually sitting in the chair. Although the setup is very similar, this isn't a problem that OSP faces because their avatar is 2D. It literally can't not fit in the chair because they drew it to fit in the chair. But with my 3D model, I realized, after all that hand brushing, the perspective my avatar would be on wouldn't be facing the camera. The chair is angled like this, so my body would either be static and have to face that way too, not looking at the camera, or I would have to twist the body and constantly have to deal with my arms clipping through the chair when it gets in the way. So all that effort, and I hadn't thought about how exactly the 3D model would end up interacting with everything. Was I being picky? Absolutely. Most people would settle for less. But with things like this, I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist so much as I want things done right the first time, so I don't have to go back and try and improve it. Ongoing projects just don't work for me. They just muddle up my brain with possibilities when I shouldn't be thinking about them at all anymore. I'll be in the middle of a writing project and go, oh, I should go add a filter on my YouTube background, just on the bricks to make them more gritty. No. Just no. Stop. I don't want to admit I'm that distracted, but I am. So lesson number 2 was considering how everything would interact with the space. And, consequently, lesson 3 was copyright. As much as I had altered and made my Sims space my own, part of me worried, since I'd be using it on a semi-professional setting, that would infringe on the fair use of the gameplay screenshot. The last thing I wanted was somehow, many years down the line, for EA to recognize that I'd used their furniture as a template, and flag me to either take my videos down or steal the copyright over them because I was using their images. It sounds a bit paranoid, but copyright is scary for creators. Not necessarily because we don't understand what fair use entails, but because people are willing to pursue petty things in the pursuit of a quick cash grab. As much as you might be entirely within your rights to use footage of something, doesn't mean you won't get screwed over by someone wrongfully claiming you can't. The process and debate of copyright is complicated and undefined in a lot of areas. So I decided to take my own advice, no matter how painful it was to throw away all that progress, and stick to undeniably non-copyrighted material for my background. If you need free copyright images, I would highly recommend Unsplash. All the photos on Unsplash are also given free use in terms of alteration. They want you to use the images for art and anything else that you want. That said, the images that they have available aren't always exactly what you want. There weren't a lot of options for me in terms of antique mirrors when I decided that was the new theme I was going to go for, so in the end I had to settle on and alter the only two that I could find that were kind of the right thing. So moving on from OSP's den-like setting, I was then leaning more towards Dutch Celestia's use of a template. That way, I could have my Avi naturally facing forward, regardless of what's around it, not to mention not needing to position the rest of the body anymore. So lesson 4, after, wasting all that time, I guess, is figuring out what's required of your aesthetic before committing to one. For a while, I was considering making my whole scene black and white, even my avatar. I really like that aesthetic, and I think that it's really clean and fancy. However, when I thought about that in terms of what I'd be interacting with on screen, such as film footage or book covers, I didn't think that it would be right to turn those black and white. That's not what the original content looks like, and would more than likely take away from some of the points that I'd have to make about the content. It would need to be unaltered. And that'd look really weird having something except for a box of movie clips running in the bottom all black and white and then them in full color. Because I was making a template rather than a scene, it wasn't as noticeable or obvious when the objects weren't of exactly the same lighting. It's all disconnected enough that they didn't have to play on each other's shadows, it's just a flat image, which is also something that you might want to consider. A really big help that I had, because Unsplash was so limited, was Canva. Canva Pro's option to download PNGs with a transparent background made the whole process so much faster and easier than having to clumsily cut out objects by hand on Photoshop from a real picture. So that's the last thing that I learned. Tip number 5 is that PNGs are the best. If you can get your hands on free-to-use PNGs, pick those over JPEGs, because they are so much easier to edit individually too, to get their lighting right or alter their color scheme, because they are just so cleanly singular from anything else. For example, I turned these plants into this, with the quick use of the brightness slider, rather than have to deal with trying to erase all of this by hand from a JPEG, which is my original attempt. This video is obviously not sponsored, I'm way too small for that, but I highly recommend Canva as a tool for any small creator out there. It's got a lot of great options for formatting things and a lot of great resources to use. Of course, the free version is a lot more limited than the paid version, but it's really handy. Plus, sometimes Canva just hands out free pro trials to you, like, again, even though you'd already had a pro trial once and didn't continue on with it. So that's what I had all month, well, going through this process of making a layout. Out of nowhere, they were like, "Do you want Canva Pro?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, I do." And it's been an amazing tool for helping me bring this all together. It even has green screen animatics that you can use for your videos to look more professional, like the subscribe button and pop-ups and stuff. Please be wary though, whether you're getting a free trial from an affiliate or just from Canva themselves. When you are agreeing to the free trial, make sure you check that the payment method that you don't expect to be using anyway is checked to monthly fees and not annually, because they always have it inherently set to annual in the hopes that you will forget to end your pro account setting before the free trial runs up so that they can ding you for $100 or so. That way, if you do forget or actually just need the pro version for a little bit longer, it's not such a huge fee taken from you out of nowhere. So in the end, this is the background that I've managed to put together after all that trial and error, and I quite like it. It's not perfect, but it's simple, and I think, unlike when I was leaning more into a scene than a layout, this gives me room to grow in terms of editing on it or needing to swap an object out for a special occasion. With the other attempts I made, there wasn't any room to alter anything once it had been painted into a flat image. With this, all the objects can remain individual in Photoshop, which is going to be really handy, I think. And think that you should take that into consideration too while considering a background. Is a layout going to be more versatile for what you're actually going to be doing? Because if you have a 3D Vtuber, unless you're rendering and sitting in a 3D space to allow for collision, half-weighing it with 2D might not work out. If, for example, like mine, your avatar was going to be sitting. Mostly people just do green screens though, so it's a non-issue for just about 90% of everyone except for me. Anyway, yeah. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching me struggle through this, and maybe my mistakes will prevent you from making the same. This layout should be live on my channel soon, and I hope you like it. I'll see you then.